What's something your parents did that seemed normal at the time, but you now realize was actually really weird? Story 1. My dad ends every yawn like he's goofy going over a cliff. I didn't know that wasn't normal for so many years. Story 2. Probably the parentification, the TBH. My mom didn't drive much by choice, so I had to run any errand that involved getting on the freeway or over a bridge, grocery shop, meal plan, cook several nights a week, and quantity by the time I was 16. My siblings did not share these duties, even the one closest in age to me just a year younger. It wasn't until I got to college that I realized I had really been the third parent, and that sucked. It wasn't until I had a kid and, for the first 8-9 years of parenthood, couldn't shake the feeling that it felt just like what I'd been doing for my siblings. I struggled to not call my child my siblings' names for the longest time. It was wild. Story 3. They would get our Christmas tree on Christmas Eve. Santa Claus brought the decorated tree and gifts. This meant they were absolutely exhausted every single Christmas, and they hosted an open house every year. It was ridiculously stressful for my mother. Dad says it was the only time he could do it, and they stopped that tree part once we stopped believing. We just get one the week of. On New Year's Day when we got up, it was gone. Story 4. I'm an 80s child. Raised by my mother, she was in her 20s, so I give her a lot of grace. I knew which bars in town would page her and which ones wouldn't. Story 5. I learned to be very, very quiet because my mom was always asleep. I'm constantly spooking my husband. My brother is 11 years older than me, and while I thought this was perfectly normally, he knew it wasn't, since he was in charge of taking care of me. We share stories now as adults, and I'm constantly amazed by how vastly different our perceptions of our childhood are. Also, being mean is a love language. We were one of those we tease because we care kinds of family. When my niece lived with us, she's my age, she wanted to actually sit down and have dinner together, and we spent the entire meal basically making fun of her so she wouldn't ask again, and I thought it was totally normal and funny to do. As an adult living in another state, I'm like, wow, y'all are just mean, actually. I see them doing it to the next generation, and it just makes me sad, honestly. Whenever I'm home, I try to show the kids that I'm not participating in that, and they can trust me not to. Like, I still playfully roast my friends and family and such, but I make sure they're in on the joke first and check in regularly to make sure they're having fun. Rest of my family just assumes you are and/or doesn't care. It's funny how things that felt like a little adventure or just a boring wait back then would probably cause a neighborhood scandal today. Times have certainly changed when it comes to what's considered normal parenting. And looking back, those long waits in the car were a very specific kind of childhood test of patience. Story 6. My parents paid little notice to where I was as long as I came back for lunch or dinner. They had no clue where us kids would go. No cell phone. Heck, people were stuck using landlines. No tracking. We just fell off face of earth. Road bikes for miles, or deep walks in the woods. When I had my son, I would panic if I didn't know for sure where he was at any given time. Story 7. My dad loved to grill, but he burnt and/or overcooked everything. On purpose. That's just the way he liked it. I thought everybody cooked that way, so I refused to eat BBQ. Story 8. My mom would take any money I got for Christmas, birthdays, holidays, and spend it on the house. I have 2 brothers. Their money never got spent on the house. Answer: same. I started working at 9 years old. I had made over $18,000 by 13, which isn't a lot, but to me it was. The plan was that I would save it for college. My mom put it into a bank account in my name that only she had access to. I'm now 18, asked about it, and she got nervous. Dad asked her how much was in there. 60. She won't even let me spend that either. She said it was because I was an expensive kid. I slept in a barn, wore the same clothes my entire childhood, same shoes, cut my hair short because I wasn't allowed to shower, wasn't allowed to go shopping or own toys. And on the very, very rare occasion I did buy something, it was with cash I'd gotten from birthdays, holidays, not from my savings account. Turns out she spent it all on makeup and beauty products, which, by the way, I'm not allowed to use. Story 9. My dad cooks with beer so much. I know a lot of people, including myself, use beer and chili or to cook brats, but Dad took it to another level. Like hot dogs boiled in beer, pork chops marinated in beer, beer canned chicken, beer and beans and cornbread, beer and taco meat. I'm sure I'm forgetting stuff. When I was in college, I started making hot dogs by boiling them in beer, and all my friends asked what I was doing. I thought that was just how you made hot dogs. Story 10. My mom was an unhinged control freak who could not deal with the smallest inconvenience. If I asked to go to a friend's house, we would go through an entire interrogation routine about what we were doing and why I couldn't just do that at home. They were not invited over because she was a hoarder and our house was covered in junk and cat piss. And she would eventually ask, why do you have to go out all the time? And why can't you just stay at home? And then go into, I guess you don't want to spend time with me. It was exhausting and typically resulted in her saying no anyway. I remember being at a friend's house, and the friend asked her mom if she could go somewhere, and her mom asked a few simple questions and said, yeah, that's fine, have fun. And I realized my mom never told me to have fun, never acted happy that I was going out with friends, and it hit me that her behavior was not normal. My mom and I get along, but we aren't close, and I still feel frustrated by how she behaved when I was young. Story 11. My mother treated and actually continues to treat me as an unpaid therapist. In Story 12, making a big joke of whether Daddy would come home with the food shopping on a Saturday afternoon, or whether he would take it all to the pub with him and then turn up hours later tipsy, or on the Sunday. His mates at the pub would bang all the chilled frozen stuff in the pub kitchen. Story 13. Being asleep pretty much all the time. She worked the night shift, so her having a different sleep schedule than the rest of us made it hard to notice just how much she was sleeping. Turns out she had undiagnosed narcolepsy my whole childhood. She'd also tell me I absolutely had to wake her up for work or she might lose her job. Then when I tried to wake her up, she'd scream at me to let her sleep and threaten punishment. Then she wouldn't remember screaming at me later. But I had a feeling that part wasn't normal. LOL. We're all doing much better these days. Answer, my ex has narcolepsy and did the same thing, or the equivalent for him. It was manageable when we first started dating, although he wasn't diagnosed at the time, just said he was a very heavy sleeper. By the end, he would get into arguments with me saying he was awake and to leave him alone, when I knew from the sound of his voice he was still asleep. Later, when he's finally awake for long enough for all of his brain to come online, he would have no memory of what he said. But he's never been a violent person or mean to me, nowhere near what your mom was like. My ex lost his license, his job, and his home because of narcolepsy. It sucks, but that's no excuse to put that on your kid. I remember feeling frustrated and anxious having to be the last resort alarm clock. Story 14. My parents would answer any question we asked to the absolute best of their ability. Then they would follow that answer up with their own personal research to ensure we had the right and most accurate information. They promoted us finding answers as well. They personally challenged their own beliefs, their own knowledge, and the stances of their religion to make sure we had the most scientifically accurate answers to everything we asked. I thought that was just what mommies and daddies did for their kids to know how the world works. Turns out I've never met someone else whose parents did 15,000th the amount of effort to educate their own children on huge questions as my parents did for dumb questions, like why is the sky blue? Answer. My parents were like this too, though it was usually more along the lines of, wow, that's a great question. Let's go to the library and find out. Pre-internet. At this library, they would guide me through looking it up in the card catalog, finding books and other sources, fact-checking, looking for bias, determining if a source was reliable, etc. They made like a game, a scavenger hunt for knowledge. Some questions they would just answer, but they were delighted when I wanted to double-check at the library. And if we discovered that they were wrong, they'd happily admit it and say it was important to correct yourself when you found out you had wrong information and learn better. I did kind of realize this was unusual, but I didn't fully realize how weird it was until I was older. I did something similar with my own kids, though we had the internet, so I incorporated that and made sure to teach them how to determine what sites were trustworthy and which definitely aren't. Media literacy is so important. We do also go to the library a lot, and I've taught them to do research the old-fashioned way as well. I wish more parents would bother to do this. The Clean Plate Club is a tradition in many households, but it can definitely create a strange relationship with food later in life. It's fascinating how those early mealtime rules and the pressure to finish everything stay with us long after we've left our parents' dinner table. Story 15. Nothing super weird, but my mom would go to work and come home and then basically zone out on the couch watching TV for all of her free time, aside from making dinner for me and my dad. And on the weekends, she never even got out of her nightgown. And when I would try to talk to her or get her attention, she'd ignore me, acting like whatever was on TV was more important than whatever I'd need. She would also drink herself stupid on cheap box wine every night. Turns out it's likely she had clinical depression as well as functional alcoholism. Story 16. Both my parents are doctors, and my sister wanted to study medicine since she was little, So a lot of our conversations at the dinner table were about surgeries medicine, like what cases my parents had seen that day, etc. I ended up with a non-zero amount of knowledge of medical terminology and sometimes forget that, no, not everyone grew up hearing that stuff, and they might get squeamish. Hard situations like the illness or passing of a loved one or an acquaintance have always been dealt with by overanalyzing the medical part of it. A family acquaintance recently passes and they spent like half an hour in the group chat discussing what could have eliminated him. It suddenly hit me that that's a super bizarre way of responding to passing. Story 17. My parents are separated, and when I didn't go to visit my father due to commitments, he told me, "You can't even come. I don't care because I have other children." My best friend told me, "It's not normal, but it never hurt me, honestly." Story 18. My parents basically never expressed any affection towards each other, physical or verbal. They also had very independent pastimes. They'd usually go out to dinner for a date a few times a year and a vacation maybe every other year, but pretty much no romantics outside of that. My current girlfriend is on the almost exact opposite end of the spectrum. Not so much love bombing as it is a straight up want to do most things together. Story 19. My mother was always angry, all the time about everything and nothing. I thought it was a normal way to behave until I went to secondary school and someone asked why I'm always angry. I just thought it was the normal way to express yourself. Answer. I have a relative who goes through life like that and treats their children and spouse terribly. Just constant rage at everything and everyone. I try to connect with the kids and do special things for them and be someone who they can talk to, but I desperately wish there was something I could do to change their circumstances. It's so heartbreaking. Any advice for me, as you yourself dealt with this as a child? Story 20. I knew a teenage boy from an Arabic country whose father was young enough to pass as an older brother. The dad literally made the son pretend they were brothers. Story 21. My parents were never once caught in any sort of intimacy position at all. I think I saw them kiss once, but it was very dry, like a constant 6-inch separation rule. Separate couches to watch TV, sides of the bed so separate you could have built a wall. Wasn't until I was older I realized most kids have walked in on their parents at some point, and it's pretty normal for your parents to show affection. Story 22. Not really what they did, but just the circumstances of their relationship. My parents have a huge age gap. My mom is 45 and my dad is 68 currently. As I got older, I started to really notice how strange it was, and it kind of caused a lot of inner conflict. You guessed it, my mom was young and my dad freshly divorced when they met each other, and he just so happened to be her boss as well. Yikes. But they are happy and still married, and I like to think me and my sister turned out really well with their care and parenting. But more on a positive note, I thought it was super normal for families to all volunteer at culture centers and at cultural events to help out. We are Cajun, and my dad did a ton of volunteering for those kinds of events, or at Jean Lafitte culture centers to cook and play music with his Cajun French band and play music for Cajun cooking shows. We even had a segment on Bizarre Foods America. People are honestly amazed when I tell them about the stuff I took part in growing up, when it was so normal to know we were going to be going somewhere to volunteer when my dad would start packing up his fiddles. Story 23. Growing up, I thought it was normal for families to treat the sons better. My older brothers could do whatever they wanted, whenever they wanted. When I couldn't do anything and had to tell them where I was going, even in our home, if I had to go to the bathroom or my room, I had to tell them. That's just a little bit of it. It would be way too long to mention everything else. Story 24. Mixing a healthy cereal in with an unhealthy one. The healthy one was cornflakes, Cheerios, Rice Krispies. The unhealthy was anything good. What's funny is the healthy ones have just as much sugar, and it just ruined cereal for me forever. Story 25. My grandmother didn't want to be called grandma, granny, nana, or anything you could think of indicating she was a grandmother. She insisted on being called Mom and her last name, which was the same as our mom's. So we called her Mom and called our mom Mama. It only seemed strange when we were older. Story 26. My mother made my sister and I eat on the kitchen floor for a very long time because she believed we were too messy for the dinner table. Story 27. My mom leaving half-finished cups of tea and coffee littered everywhere throughout the house. Most human beings I know actually finish their drinks. Story 28. Raised Mormon. Some gems that I had to tell my friends. I can't have Dr. Pepper. It's against my religion. How about a Sprite? I can't play on Sundays. It's against my religion. I can't wear sleeveless shirts or two-piece swimsuits. That's immodest. Why were my shoulders sexualized as a kindergartner? I pay 10 of everything I earned to the church. Why does a corporation with hundreds of billions of dollars need a 12-year-old's babysitting money? They take money from starving people in Africa while hoarding enough wealth to make a Fortune 500 company blush. Have you heard of the Book of Mormon? I was indoctrinated that I needed to save my Christian friends. I was so worried about them and beat myself up for not being able to convert a single one of them. There are evil spirits all around us, but my dad has the power to cast them out. Story 29. My family calls large family gatherings family hamburgers. I thought this was normal until my boyfriend started integrating into the family, and he was so confused. Story 30. My parents almost never ever engaged in any kind of PDA. I can count on one hand the number of times I've actually seen them kiss or hold hands or anything like that. On a more positive note, my dad raised my sister and I the exact same way he raised my brother. We all had to learn how to change a flat tire and how to do dishes and stuff like that. There wasn't really a concept of woman's man's work in our house, which I really appreciate. Story 31. When us kids would get a splinter in our foot, old house, wooden floors, they'd grab a piece of bacon fat and use masking tape to hold it in place over the splinter. My dad said the fat would draw out the splinter. It usually did, after an hour or two. Story 32. Not as severe as some of these, but my parents eat cough drops like candy. It was something my dad did, and then my mom started doing it, and I genuinely have no idea why. I dislike asking my parents if they have gum or a mint, and then they hand me a fudge halls like, no, those things have two completely different purposes. Story 33. My parents, till this day, keep their bowls in a drawer, and not in a cabinet. It's actually super weird, and I didn't realize until people started coming over more and pointing it out. When I lived on my own in college, I did not continue the tradition, lol. Story 34. My mom once made me try on her high school cheerleading skirt. I was about 10 and it was visibly too small for me before I tried to put it on, but she made me try anyway. She was a tiny girl in high school and I was my adult height already and reasonably proportional. It obviously wasn't going to fit. To this day, I can't understand what the point of that was. Did she want me to think I was fat? Was she trying to make herself feel better about her adult size by putting me down? Was she delusional and somehow thought her tiny skirt would fit me? Answer: man, the shoot our mothers do. I was terrified I would have girls when I started having kids because I knew I was not remotely healed from the generational image trauma. I feel horrible for my mother that's 70 years in and she is still seeking validation every time she loses a pound. She is skinny, always was thin. I refuse to discuss weight with her. What she must have grown up with and gone through to have never healed is awful. She can still shut all the way up, though. Story 35. Moving from various people's houses every 6 months to a year. Never seeing her BC, she was working 2-3 jobs at a time. Took me till my 20s to realize we were homeless for the majority of my first decade alive, LMAO. Made worse BC, that's how she preferred it due to her own trauma. We could have stopped bouncing around and being shoved in spare room, already occupied rooms, unfinished basements at pretty much any time. Story 36. My parents had me mixing and pouring their alcoholic drinks when I was like 7. I was also very clumsy. I'm pretty sure there was a disorder of some kind because I mean really clumsy, regardless of how hard I tried, and boy did I try to be careful. So they had me making drinks and pouring wine into these fragile, super thin glasses and would get massively angry when I would accidentally break them. Then they would take any of my birthday or whatever money to buy them new glasses, which I would also inevitably break. I think they thought I was doing it on purpose, but I wasn't. Just like the 10 sprained ankles, scarred knees from falling on my bike so much or falling down the stairs a few times. It's only been as an adult and people in my house haven't fallen down our stairs repeatedly that I've started realizing how abnormal it was that I'd fall down the stairs like a couple times a year. Story 37. Not my parents, but my grandparents share about an inch of bath water every day for their baths. No more than an inch. One takes a bath first, then the other gets in. They both grew up during the Great Depression, and this odd habit stems from there, along with most of our beloved family recipes, which I only discovered were Great Depression meals when I became an adult. LOL. Story 38. I was pretty hyper-aware of how odd my family was from a young age. My mom had mental health issues, and my parents were both just weirdos anyway. One thing that I didn't realize was weird until later in life was how often we talked about my mom's firstborn baby who didn't survive. He was only alive for a few hours, so not a stillborn, but nearly. We would celebrate his birthday every year, white cake with vanilla frosting, and talk about how old he would be and what he might be doing at that age. We would mention him often and muse about what his personality might be like. basically daydreaming about a hypothetical older sibling. My mom would retell the story of his birth passing as often and casually as any other story from her life. She believed in ghosts and believed that I played with his ghost when I was a toddler. I always stumbled to answer questions in school about whether I was the oldest sibling or not. I was never allowed to forget that I wasn't the first. Answer: that's extreme, to put it lightly. I'm so sorry you went through all that. My parents' firstborn daughter was born premature and she passed away at 1 month old. My mom made sure my older brother and I knew about her, but she did it in a very different way. She didn't talk about her much, but it was never a taboo subject, and my sister's passing and memory didn't impact our lives in an unhealthy way. Mom would take us to our sister's grave every now and then, but it was never maudlin or even very mournful. We would say hi, tell our sister about our day, what we did in school, etc., and we'd run around, climb the trees in the cemetery. It was more like a play date with our big sister in spirit, and those times are definitely a huge reason why I love cemeteries. My mom was a rare person, and if anyone was meant to be a mom, it was her. She died when I was 6, and I can't help but wonder how different I would be as a person if she had been able to raise me. I'm not exactly unhappy with who I am, but I have a very strong feeling that I would have been vastly emotionally and mentally healthier if she could have been here longer. Having a family mating call or a specific whistle is actually more common than you'd think, though it doesn't make it any less weird when you're in public. It's an efficient way to stay connected in a crowd, even if it feels a bit embarrassing when you're a teenager just trying to blend in. Story 39. There were a lot of us kids, and my parents couldn't really afford to take us to theme parks or other expensive places for entertainment, so we played ball or jumped rope, etc. But if we saw a really great grassy hill while out driving, it was not uncommon for someone to yell out, "Pull over!" And we'd all jump out of the car and roll down the grassy hills until we were exhausted. Free and fun. Story 40. I didn't realize that having a parent in jail prison wasn't normal until high school. All of my cousins had parents who did time, my aunt's uncles. I even have an uncle with a prison tattoo of my name because I was his favorite niece. My mom was in prison too, and so was my best friend's mom, and our good friend's mom down the street. Most of the kids I knew had a parent in prison, usually a dad, but sometimes a mom, and sometimes both at once. Story 41. I had a parent who had a shelf in the fridge that was off limits. It's where all the good food was placed. Touching or eating of that shelf was punishable to the highest degree. Imagine chocolate milk, leftover Chinese food, imported candies, green apples, cheesecake. It all went onto the shelf. Story 42. My mom comes from a hyper family, very talkative. My dad said when he first went to a family dinner at her house, he never was able to say anything because everyone else just talked over each other. I thought it was normal for meals to always be filled with talking, movies filled with commentary, and conversation filled with interruptions. Dad would always just kind of watch these interactions. Now, all us adult cousins on my mom's side are getting diagnosed with ADHD. My sis and I got diagnosed a few years ago. LOL. Story 43. Made me skip holidays. They were Jehovah's Witness. It sucked, but I at least got to feel smug about being the only guy in the room that God was going to save. Then I realized there is no God, and I never got a Christmas. Story 44. We weren't allowed in our parents' bedroom without permission. When they weren't home, they locked the door. It was mind-blowing to go to a friend's house and have free reign of the house and even play in their parents' bedroom. Story 45. I always knew my dad drank like a fish, but he was never tipsy around us and always brought the money in, so I viewed it as a hobby more than anything. He drinks maybe a few drinks a week now and is doing great in life, he said. When I was a kid, he used to come home from work with the hallway spinning, and it only has occurred to me now he was a functional alcoholic. Answer. Until I went to nursing school, I assumed that 5 to 10 drinks per night was normal after growing up with my dad. Things got bad, then better, then worse. When I started dating my now husband, I told my dad I would never bring his kids over to visit after 2 p.m. because I wasn't going to expose them to what I grew up thinking was normal. He's 8 years sober this month. I love my dad. I'm so glad I have him back. Story 46. For context, I live in Australia, and growing up, we used to get lots of large huntsman spiders in the house that can range anywhere from 5 centimeter to 15 centimeter leg span. They are huge and scary looking, but harmless. My dad always called them Boris and said Boris will never hurt you unless you hurt him. We were taught early on to not eliminate huntsman spiders, but to catch them and release them outside. Sounding pretty normal so far, right? Well, my dad would make us catch them by hand. I vividly remember my little brother being the victim of Dad trying to teach this lesson. He would have only been about 4, so when Dad caught Boris from the wall and tried to transfer him to my brother to then take outside, Boris' legs stuck out from his little 4-yo hands, wriggling wildly. Of course, my brother freaked out and dropped us, who promptly ran away not to be seen for a few days. Safe to say, I don't have the best relationship with my dad or spiders. Story 47. In my family, it's a running joke, kinda, that my dad is God. Like he calls himself God, and if you say things like, God darn it, he will respond with, no, I didn't. That being said, my little brother is Jesus Christ, my little sister is the devil, I am the Holy Ghost, and my mother is the sacrificial lamb, because she wasn't a virgin, so she couldn't be the Virgin Mary. It got to the point that even my friends in high school would join in and make jokes about my father being God and everything. No, we don't truly believe he is God, but he is a diagnosed, unmedicated bipolar narcissist, so I think he definitely has a God complex. Story 48. 1. My mom emptied the bathroom trash can into the main trash in the kitchen every night when she took a bath around 7 p.m., and we were not allowed to put anything in the bathroom trash can after that time. If we had to throw something away, we had to take it to the kitchen trash can. 2. My mom color-coded bath towels and washcloths. All our towels and washcloths were burgundy in color. She assigned each one of us, including herself and my dad, a color and stitched that color X on the label of one towel and one washcloth. We were to use that towel and washcloth only and had to use it 3-4 days before putting it in the laundry because we did laundry twice a week. We were not allowed to get another towel from the linen closet if it was in the laundry. If you had to take a shower, you had to wait until the laundry was done. 3. She also color-coded hangers. We used those plastic hangers, and each one of us, including herself and my dad, had an assigned color. Everyone had to bring down their empty hangers for laundry day. When we, meaning my sister and I, were doing laundry, she could tell who didn't return their hangers by the color, and their stuff would be folded instead of hung on hangers. 4. My sister and I had a list of chores to do every day during the summer. Aside from laundry twice a week, we had to clean the house once a week and have dinner on the table when she got home from work. She was a nurse and got home around 4:30 p.m. We could not go anywhere during summer vacation or have any friends over because my parents were at work. After dinner, we had to wash dry and put away the dishes before we could go out with friends, and by that time it was 6 p.m. We all grow up thinking our family's specific habits and quirks are the gold standard for how the world works. It's always a bit of a reality check when you finally step outside that family bubble and realize that your normal was actually quite a unique way of doing things. Story 49. My father was a relentlessly self-improving boulangerie owner from Belgium with low-grade narcolepsy and a penchant for buggery. My mother was a 15-year-old French adult worker named Chloe with webbed feet. My father would womanize, he would drink, he would make outrageous claims like he invented the question mark. Sometimes he would accuse chestnuts of being lazy, the sort of general malaise that only the genius possess in The Insane Lament. My childhood was typical. Summers in Rangoon, luge lessons. In the spring, we'd make meat helmets. When I was insolent, I was placed in a burlap bag and beaten with reeds. Pretty standard, really. At the age of 12, I received my first scribe. At the age of 14, a Zoroastrian named Vilma ritualistically shaved my testicles. There really is nothing like a shorn scrotum. It's breathtaking. I suggest you try it. Story 50. Beating and humiliating your children. As kids, we would get kicked out of the house in the middle of the night and sent to the backyard. Super weird. Yes, therapy and meditation have helped me greatly. Story 51. My mom used to forcibly shower me until I was almost an adult. I protested this a lot when I was young, and only after almost turning 17 was I allowed to bathe myself. As in, I want to shower myself, but she wouldn't allow me, and she would bathe me even if I always stated I can manage my own body. I always disliked how my mom always felt the need to control and monitor my life and body. Probably why I had some resentment against her in the past. My relationship with her is pretty great right now. Regardless, she lost a son before I was born. Maybe that's why she was always too stoic too, a sharp contrast to my father. I wonder if my mom's lack of respect for my boundaries is the reason I've gotten essayed groped so much so often when I go out and haven't done anything about it, besides going to therapy, but definitely not telling my psychologist because I don't know how the both of them would react to that new piece of information. Story 52. Drinking cocktails and smoking cigarettes in the car on road trips like they were hanging out at the local gin joint. Story 53. My mom used to make me and my sister wear matching outfits every single day until we were like 11. At the time, it felt cute. Now it just feels like we were part of some weird twin experiment. Answer. Oof, I can remember this clothing company called Kelly's Kids was super popular growing up in the South. People would order these matching monogrammed old South heirloom outfits for their kids that were completely impractical. I can remember going into a trunk show at one point where you could see all the new pieces from the catalog and being so grateful my mom wasn't interested in forking over the equivalence of our mortgage on a matching spring wardrobe for my sister and I. LOL. Story 54. When I upset my mom as a kid, she would threaten to throw herself off a bridge and eliminate herself. Sometimes she'd leave for hours after she said it, leading me to think she was dead. When I tell people now, I try to say it like it's funny, but they never laugh. Lol. Story 55. Leaving food on the stove overnight and eating it for breakfast. My wife was horrified, but I've got a cast iron stomach, so... Story 56. Growing hella plant substance and storing it in the spare bedroom that was also used for playing Nintendo. Story 57. TV Guardian. It read the closed captions of whatever we were watching. If it detected foul language, it would mute the volume for that phrase, change the captions to something family-friendly. So intimacy became hugs. Darn fudge were just omitted. Bon appetit became bon appetit figure. Good times. Story 58. They slept in separate bedrooms on opposite ends of the house. Dad was an early riser, so Mom became nocturnal to avoid him. They only saw each other at dinner. Story 59. Everyone talking about how harmful behavior or neglectful their parents were, and I'm here like my weirdo dad buys candy corn and mellow cream pumpkins and sets them out for guests like it's some great treat we all want. Story 60. Mom let us play with the dry cleaning plastic covering. We would put it over our heads and pretend we were ghosts. Story 61. My mom isn't touchy-feely. She has a hug once a week rule, which sometimes got stretched out 2 weeks out. If I tried to hug her, I'd get wrestled down and punched in the arm or leg really hard, and then I earned a hug. Like this woman would feel for the bone before punching me directly in what she called the sweet spot. She would laugh while doing so I would laugh. To me, it was a game, and the punches replaced what the hugs were for. To me, that's just her being funny and showing love. So imagine my surprise when my friend's mom are so huggy and clingy, and I tell them the wonderful stories of how affectionate my mom is. And I get a soft, horrified, "Are you okay?" I was until you said it wasn't normal. Now I struggle with my overly affectionate partner, but I'm working on it. Story 62. Mine loved me, were always there for me when I needed them, but also gave me space to grow and be my own person. The older I get, the more I learn that this was, apparently, pretty rare. Story 63. Mom would send me into the store to buy a carton of cigarettes, which every clerk in Memphis promptly sold to a 6-year-old with no questions. I was always allowed to keep the change. Oh, this was late 1960s. BTW. Story 64. Am my mother's eldest, and she had me clean the entire house every day after school starting at like 12-ish. And I already had a heavy chore load prior to that even, but I was charged with laundry for a house of 5, dishes, cat box, bathroom, etc., until it was all clean from 12 on. My mother raised us on food stamps primarily, and would always assert that anything of nutritional value was too expensive. I was barely allowed fruit at all the entire time I was growing up. My mom would tell us to go play and then lock us out for the entire day. My mom and whoever she was dating at the time would fudge loud with us in the next room in the middle of the day regularly. I knew all about what intimacy was by the time I was 7. Huge explosive fights all night between my mom and every partner she ever had, leading to little to no sleep, then walk a mile to school the next morning by myself. My mother also left me in our government housing home by myself at age 17 and moved her and the rest of my siblings into her new boyfriend's house, which I wasn't welcome at. My entire senior year was spent getting rides from people to get to school and trying to not be scared to live in the house by myself. It had bars on all the windows, if that adds any context. My mother also refused to pay an extra $25 a month for my health insurance as soon as I turned 18, refused to fill out any college paperwork I needed when I did everything else by myself, and it was the last thing I needed in order to attend out of high school. She also shut off my phone as soon as I turned 18. She also robbed me for $700 when I was in my 20s and had just gotten into legal trouble and called asking her for help. She said she would come if I paid her gas, and I asked how much, and she said $700. And I just gave it to her because I was really worse for wear and needed support, and she kept calling me updating where she was and then just never showed up. Turned out she kept it and was at home the whole time. Didn't realize until the last few years in my 30s that it would never, ever occur to me to do any of that to any child I ever have. She's weird as hell. The concept of privacy varies wildly from one home to another, and some parents have a very different definition of personal space than others. Growing up with those kinds of strict rules definitely changes your perspective on what it means to have a place of your own as an adult. Story 65. My mom was perfectly capable of playing DD with us on the weekend, but chose to take that time to be by herself in the kitchen where she made baked goods for us. No one is more powerful than the DM's wife. My dad also took pleasure in eliminate our characters. He had a eliminate box where he would write down the characters he eliminate, with what and who was playing. He eliminate my first character with spiders. Henceforth, all my characters have arachnophobia. Story 66. I spent a lot of time in kids' rooms, so my mom could gamble That's what you did on weekends, turns out it's not. Story 67. There was absolutely nothing normal about my parents, and I knew from a very young age that things were fucked up. Story 68. I didn't know that most people were allowed to use the kitchen whenever they wanted. Aside from a glass of water, I was not allowed to ingest anything that wasn't served at mealtime. We were latchkey kids, and we were left a note on the counter that said what we were allowed to eat as a snack, and inventories of the contents of the kitchen were taken. We also had to clean our plates no matter what, but did not have control over how much food was put on our plates. Answer. I personally believe the must-eat everything on your plate thing is why so many of us have weight and overeating issues today. We used to have to fight this every summer when my bonus daughter would get home from her bio dad's house. He'd load up her plate, make her eat it all, then tell her she was fat. It would take a week or two to get her comfortable eating what her body was telling her to eat. Story 69. Our family pet was a Burmese python. It broke its cage at one point, and my parents never replaced it. It lived in our bathroom most of the time and also in their bedroom. If you left the door open, it had free reign of the house. It was 12 feet long. Answer. My dad got a probably illegal boa from a friend. She was big enough to be a little concerning when she was ornery, as he put it. But when I moved in, around 14 with him, he assured me she'd never be out. Well, he must have gotten careless with the latch because I woke up with her in my bed one day, just enjoying the warmth of my body heat, I guess. And when I screamed and moved fast, she got ornery and moved fast too. It's a darn good thing Dad woke up fast because she was a heck of a lot more than a little concerning to my scrawny little 14-year-old self. I stayed with friends for a couple of days, didn't come back until he'd found her a new home. Story 70. My dad is a bit obsessed with my appearance. I've seen him zooming into our family pictures to make sure I look thin for Facebook. When I had gained weight, he would constantly shame me, but now that I've lost some weight, he's much nicer to me. Answer. Writer David Sedaris has an essay where his sister, comedian and actress Amy Sedaris, was the focus of their dad's obsession with his daughters being attractive, even as adults. As an attractive celebrity, he really cherished that about her. One time she came to visit and rented a fat suit, but only wore the bottom half when she arrived. The entire visit, their dad was visibly pained and about cried when she bent over to get something from the fridge, which she did often. It wasn't until the day she left that she let him see her back in her normal shape. Served him right. Story 71. We grew up with nicknames for absolutely everything. I thought it was totally normal until my husband pointed it out. When I said everyone does that, he said, no, they don't. You have two nicknames, oatmeal cookies, one for if they have cocoa and one for they don't. That's weird. And now see, he has a point, lol. Story 72. My dad was really controlling of my mom. She used to get berated if the tins in the cupboard weren't lined up and say soups weren't in a line, peas weren't in a line. It was intolerable, but my mom used to hide it. He used to hide pieces of paper in odd places to try and ensure my mom had cleaned properly. I went into a relationship just like that, but worse. I have since broken the cycle. Single mom. I will never let a man do this to me again. Story 73. Oh my God, the harmful behavior. I grew up such a horrible friend. To this day, I still feel like I go too far in banter sometimes. Then I overthink it. Story 74. My mom would ask almost every day, what did you learn in school today? And if I ever said nothing, she would push me. Oh, you sat at your desk and stared at the wall for 7 hours today? I grew up thinking that learning at school was the important thing and that grades didn't really matter as long as you engaged meaningfully with the material. I was a fully grown adult when I realized how many parents only ask their kids how their grades are and how many kids don't value learning at all. Story 75. Loved me unconditionally, encouraged me to pursue whatever brought me joy, set healthy boundaries but didn't try to punish me by grounding me, etc. Instead, I only wanted to make them happy and proud. Now that I'm older, I've realized the vast majority of people did not have this growing up. Story 76. Oh man, in my family, we clung to ancient superstition way longer than normal. Like if we couldn't find the car keys, must have been a demon. Phone stops working? Cursed. Someone gets sick? Definitely the evil eye. It wasn't even said jokingly, it was dead serious. It got so deep that I honestly started believing it as a kid. The wildest moment, though, I came home from school one day and my mom was standing in the hallway, pale and shaking, saying blood had dripped from the ceiling. Spoiler, it hadn't. Turned out, she was dealing with pretty intense delusions, which I only started realizing as I got older and began untangling all that stuff. Looking back, yeah, that was full-blown WTF. Story 77. My parents never paid for health insurance for my sisters and I. Therefore, we didn't go to the doctor. If we needed a dentist, we traveled to Mexico over 10 hours just to have dental work. When we went to Mexico, my mom would bring back a variety of medications and antibiotics. If we ever got sick, my mom was the doctor, pharmacist, and nurse. They would sell her the syringes and everything. My mom was also big on home remedies, so she would take us to some lady's house, and the lady would massage our stomach and make us drink the most disgusting carbonated drink. Thank God we never needed any emergency care. Story 78. They only let us wear religious costumes for Halloween. My sister was Mary, someone else was Mary Magdalena, some people were sheep, etc. At the time, we thought it was cool that we were devoted Catholics now. Like WTF. Why even go trick-or-treating then? Story 79. When I was little and we would drive by a pasture, there were many, we were in a rural area, he'd do a wave towards the window and say, "Hi cows, bye cows." One time he said I got upset and loudly said, "I wanted to say it." Story 80. My dad stopped working when I was in elementary school. He was a mechanic and loved cars. Turns out he was really sick. They never disclosed how much, and had heart problems so he couldn't work and handle the stress. But he was still active in his daily life, went on walks, rode his bike, cooked and did housework. He just dropped dead when I graduated high school. Story 81. Whenever my parents would do something that us kids found annoying, they would continue to do it over and over again. Even if you tried to walk away, they would follow you around repeatedly doing it until you snapped. Then the punishment came. I don't have anything more to say on that. Story 82. I thought vacations were meant for visiting family. In 8th grade, a friend of mine told me that her family went to Orlando for vacation. I asked if she stayed with her grandma, also not unusual for grandmas to live in Florida, but looked at me, shook her head, and said no one. We stayed in a hotel. I thought she was incredulous. I insisted she must have stayed with someone she was related to. She just shook her head no. Her mom overheard us talking and said, "We don't know anybody in Florida." Story 83. My mom and grandparents, her parents, would walk out of their way to pick up change on the sidewalk street parking lot. Anything that looked shiny, they would hustle over and pick it up. Once my mom stopped the car along a busy road because there was weirdly a ton of change on the side of the road, and she picked up about 5 worth. It was super embarrassing at the time, but I find myself getting excited about finding a penny here or there now. Story 84. My mom grew up with a mom who took in animals. All kinds, usually to nurse them back to health. Possums, skunks, cats, birds, hedgehogs, you name it. Well, as I grew up, instead of my mom taking in animals, she would take in people. She has a huge, amazing heart, but she would find people and usually adopt them, give them money, find them places to stay, take them food, etc. It was not abnormal for there to be random people at our house all the time. I vividly remember jumping on the trampoline, making sandwiches, playing computer games, etc. with virtual strangers. As kids, we just took in stride. As an adult myself, now looking back, that was so dangerous. Story 85. We have an outside name and an inside name, i.e. we have an official name that people outside of the family calls and another name that only people within the family calls us. I have not seen anyone that did the same as us. Haha. Story 86. My parents put me in charge of watching my siblings even though my grandma was home. They gave the cell phone to a 7-year-old BC. I was more responsible than my grandma. Also, I realized that it wasn't normal to be afraid of your dad. Story 87. My dad said when he was 10, his grandmother made him drive her from Oregon to California. This was in 1952. She also wouldn't let him roll the windows down because if they were up, people would think they were wealthy and had air conditioning. They didn't have air conditioning and were poor. Story 88. Put a few ice cubes in a 24OZ class, filled it with straight vodka, and then took my sisters and me on our Saturday errands. Story 89. My mom had a strange obsession with my ass cheeks, which she referred to as the dreamy duo, but my brothers didn't get the same treatment. If I asked for permission to do something, she insisted on squeezing my jerk first. I became conditioned to offer and jerk grab when trying to butter her up. I can remember getting weirded out by it around 4th grade and insisting that she not grab my jerk, but I think I ended up getting sent to my room for the resistance. I'm still not sure what that was about. It never escalated further. Maybe she just thought it was funny when she was tipsy, but I don't remember if booze was always involved. She once shared an anecdote about a time she got hit by a car, but when I asked her how it played out, all she would say was I was hypnotized by a boy with a cute butt on the other side of the road. I think you can guess if I ended up as in jerk or tits kind of guy. Story 90. My parents had this rule that if you or anyone called someone a rotter, you or that person had to be chased around and tickled. It led to many fun times of being chased around running from tickling. But looking back now, it was two very weird things to go together. My parents are very silly humans, though. Story 91. As a kid, my mom made me put my arms up when walking through a parking lot so cars could see me, even though she was right beside me. Story 92. My mom always said rabbits, rabbits, rabbits on the first of the month, ostensibly for good luck, but I'm sure she didn't believe it. It was just a thing you said on the first of every month. I thought everyone did this until I went to college and my roommates looked at me like I was insane. Story 93. Talking about childhood experiences with others as a young adult and learning A, other people's parents didn't slap them across the face, and B, the funny childhood story of getting big enough to physically stop my parent from slapping me is, in fact, not funny to everyone. Story 94. My mom had me write letters to my grandma, who was dead, by the way. She died before I was even born, so I never met her. And then I would put them on the fireplace mantle and take them and pretend like the angels came and got them and took them to my grandma. I told my wife, who also grew up deeply religious, this when we first started dating, and she gave me a look of actual horror. She was like, so she was doing the Santa Claus thing, but with your dead grandma? Story 95. My dad asked me to get all my friends together for a trip to the Private Pictures Beach. Later on discovered he was a pedo. Story 96. Drank adult beverage from the moment they walked in the door at 5:30 p.m. until they went to bed. Martinis before dinner, bourbon and water after dinner. I didn't know any different. Story 97. Maybe not weird in the bad way, but as a kid, I broke a window to the basement while playing outside with a ball. My parents found put by chance right before some bad weather hit, and instead of being mad, they sat my child jerk down and explained that things break. But when they do it important to tell an adult so they can fix it, if they had not seen the broken window by chance, it would have rained into our basement for a couple of days, and that would be very bad. They promised me that as long as it was an honest accident, they would never be mad if I broke something but told them so they could fix it. And they kept their word through my entire childhood. Not a lot of children get to have that experience. Story 98. Dad would take us to Grateful Dead concerts, starting when we were about 5 and 7. This was in the 80s, full-on Jerry Garcia era. Dad'd be doing the high on acid dance. Sis and I would be left on our own to figure out how to find the bathroom in a football stadium and get back to Dad without getting lost forever. He'd also hotbox in the car with us in the back seat, racing down the interstate. Mom didn't seem to care. I disliked the Grateful Dead a lot. I've been to a ton of concerts until I was about 14 and just said fudge no. I have some entertaining memories sitting on Jerry's lap, thinking he was Santa, that sort of thing. But watching Dad do the acid dance, yeah, it'll pass. Story 99. My dad disliked hearing us say we were hungry when we were out and about for a while, so my mom made up a secret code where we'd flick our noses rather than saying it out loud. Story 100. Leave me alone for long periods of time when I was small. Like one time I was alone for about a week. I was maybe 7, I went to school, came home, played, kept myself amused, then went to bed. What makes it odd to me now is that my grandparents lived 2 blocks away, and it would have been perfectly fine to them if I would have went to go stay there during that time. My mom wasn't a very good person at all. Story 101. They told me fart was a swear word, and then I got made fun of at school when I accused other kids of swearing when they said it. Story 102. They were in a cult. I didn't realize it initially because we didn't live on the farm with everyone else, though we did later. But they were heavily involved with and connected to the cult, and all their decisions were influenced by their involvement. We often had strange people staying in our home, which I now realize was super inappropriate with them having 5 young children. It all seemed normal at the time. Story 103. My mom used to drive home to vacuum every single day in her lunch hour. Even if I was home and could do it, she would drive home and do it while tutting, then drive back to work. I'm wondering if it was something my dad insisted upon. My dad was an arsehole. Too much weirdness. Story 104. My dad's a mythology nut. He would always bring me here along with his friends to do some rituals with me and my family. Story 105. My mom used to put Phenergan in our milk to make us go to sleep. Never seemed normal after I found out, age 10, just made a lot of sense as to why the regular-looking milk we were getting at bedtime tasted like strawberries and made me feel relaxed and sleepy. Safe to say I never accepted a drink offer again after that. Only found out because she was discussing it with her friend while driving us to school one morning. Story 106. On my 13th birthday, I had to sign a contract agreement to stay a virgin until I was married, as well as received a gold band ring to wear on my wedding finger. My older sisters, 3 of them, did it when they turned 13. As a kid, you don't realize how fudged that whole agreement is. As an adult with 2 daughters, one who is 14, I would never do this. Story 107. When my dad is driving down the road, he reads out loud the signs. McDonald's Honey Baked Ham, China Garden Jones Drive. We have no idea why he does it, LOL. Answer. This is hilarious. A few years ago, my niece had started dating the guy she would eventually marry. After a while of dating, he was invited on family vacation. 8 hours in the car. Every exit we hit, McDonald's, Burger King, Panda Express, Panera Bread. There's a Wawa at exit 31. Bridge clearance, 83. On and on. We got there for him, and I said to my partner, what in the hell happened on the way down here? I'm glad he seems to be enjoying himself, but reading every sign. We laughed it off. Occasionally now when my partner is driving, or vice versa, we'll do the same to the other. Story 108. My dad would whistle speak to us, like he would go literal days where he would just whistle the syllables of words when speaking to us, like take the garbage out, whistle, 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 whistle. Or there were 6 of us, and we only had a 5-seat vehicle, so when we all had to go somewhere, one of us would ride in the trunk. It was an escorted, so it wasn't closed off like a normal trunk. Story 109. Being terrified of your dad and having to act like a different person when he was home. Always on guard. Don't show any emotions. No quick movements. Keep your voice low. Anything could set him off. I just thought all dads were like that. It was mind-blowing to me going over to a friend's house and seeing them goofing off or having fun with their dad. Story 110. My whole extended family had a concept called outside food, which was food to be eaten exclusively outdoors. This included pixie sticks, watermelon, ice cream cones, popsicles, etc. This is not real. The real name for this food category is shoot kids are liable to spill. Story 111. I was pretty much my mom's therapist from a very young age. No child should have to hear about their mother's past traumas. I found out when I was 7 that her stepdad beat and violation her and my grandmother knew, but didn't do shoot about it. I have trauma from her trauma. I know she didn't have many people to talk to, but I don't know why she chose me, her youngest child and daughter, to trauma dump on. She had an awful life. Story 112. My mom used to make me call her by her first name in public because she didn't want people to know she had kids. I thought all moms did this until I was like 12 and mentioned it to a friend. The look of horror on her face made me realize this wasn't exactly standard parenting. Answer. Rather different, but my sister's fiancé wants their future kids to call him by his first name because daddy is too weird. I have no clear answer why he can't just go by dad, and I'd be surprised if he didn't eventually just accept that. Edit. LMA, all the comments about him being highly into adult content are hilarious. That's so not him. He would never let my sister call him daddy either. If anything, that might be weirder. But it's very funny, so thank you for the laughs. Story 113. My dad was almost 60 when I was born. My mother was 28 and intellectually developmentally delayed, but high-functioning, with an IQ probably high 60s. My father never attended school, born 1908, and my mom finished 8th grade. They must have washed the forks in cold water without soap. Our forks always had black, hard stuff between the tines, about 34 way up. I thought that's what normal forks looked like. I remember the first time I saw a regular fork and was amazed at how it had spaces all the way down between the tine. Story 114. I thought all married couples dislike each other. I went on a field trip with 2 married teachers in high school, and saw them holding hands and was completely mystified. Answer: this was my experience too. I had friends and extended family constantly ask why I wanted my boyfriend to argue with me all the time. What I really wanted was for him to feel comfortable enough to tell me what he was thinking and feeling, because my parents resented each for not communicating and then would lash out at each other. I truly believed that happy marriages and friendships were only in movies. Story 115. My grandmother refused to be called Grandma. She insisted on being called Mama Willie. Yes, her name was Willie, twin of Lily. Story 116. My parents believed a little too strongly in the satanic panic that was in full swing in the 1980s. They forbid me from playing Dungeons and Dragons and later Magic the Gathering. They talked about how Satan worshippers were everywhere and out to kidnap people to sacrifice them. It seemed like another version of Stranger Danger, and now in hindsight, it was a lot weirder how they responded to it. Story 117. Ignore teachers and doctors urging me to get tested for a learning disability. In the 90s, parents who let their kids be diagnosed with ADD were often looked down on as lazy parents, while those who refused were put on pedestals. That and rewinding the tape are two reasons not to miss the 1990s. Story 118. My mom complaining about my dad to me all the time. She didn't have close friends and wanted her marriage to look perfect to wider family, so instead she shared all her frustrations with me. That definitely damaged my perception of marriage. Answer: similar here. It's interesting hearing one parent complain about the other leads to a whole heap of internal confusion. I wish my mom had divorced my dad 10 years before she did. I think we would have all been better off emotionally. She apologized for years after the divorce because she thought the emotional troubles I was having was due to their separation, except that was the best thing she'd done for us. My mother is human and I love her dearly, but 33-year-old me would love to go back in time and give her a good talking to. Story 119. A lot. However, most of it I knew wasn't normal. So we'll go with one of the funnier memories. We used to live in an old house with radiator heat. It would get super dry and the static electricity was crazy. So sometimes at night we'd shut the lights off, grab metal utensils and shuffle our socks, us on the carpet, and shock each other. With the lights off, you could just see the sparks flying. Story 120. My parents used to meticulously track gas mileage, MPG, and gas price on fill-ups. They kept a notebook and pen in the glove box and filled out their weird little data sheet religiously. I've never seen anyone else ever do this. Granted, it was the 80s, but they did stop at one point. I guess it was to see if the car needed a tune-up. Weird, weird, weird. Story 121. If I acted out in a restaurant at all, even crying when I was an appropriate crying age, my dad would get all huffy and leave to wait in the car. He would sit there the entire meal. Story 122. My parents who were divorced both had a habit of leaving little me in the car alone. Go into 7-Eleven, go to a friend's house, go to a job interview. So many things I got left in the car alone. Thankfully, they always rolled the windows down. Story 123. My mom is really into birds, and my dad likes nature. Growing up, if anyone in the family spotted an uncommon bird or animal, they would say the name of it, and we would all stop what we were doing to watch it. It wasn't until I was in my late 20s that I realized this wasn't something everyone did. I happily carry on this weirdness, and my wife happily humors me by watching the bird animal and saying wow as one does. Answer: LOL. My spouse and I are apparently weird like your parents. Anytime one of us finds an uncommon insect, animal, or plant, we holler and everyone in the family comes over to check it out, share a fact about it, and watch it for a bit. I didn't realize this was weird, but at least I know my kid will likely embrace this weirdness into adulthood as you have. Story 124. My parents used to make us have what they called a no process when we were angry. It consisted of yelling into pillows or screaming in our room or shouting the things we would want to say to the person we were angry with or punching a mattress. Basically, they would force us to unleash whatever rage we were feeling. I do not know where the phrase no process came from, and I didn't realize till adulthood that no one else knew WTF I was talking about. Answer: my mom had us do this. She didn't call it no process, but I'm sure she picked it up from a parenting child psychology book. Maybe your parents read the same one. It wasn't a great tactic. I was already prone to hitting myself as a little kid, undiagnosed autistic. When I got older, emotions got bigger. I'd really do some damage and punch hard surfaces or bite my arm until it left a mark. What my twin and I disliked most, after we let out our anger separately since it was usually over regular sibling fighting, she'd pull out 2 dining room chairs, make us look each other in the eyes and use I feel statements until we both apologized, accepted fault, and then hug. No matter what, if my sister stole my toy, somehow I had to figure out what I did that caused it, and vice versa. We'd make shoot up eventually just to get it over with. Mom still fancies herself some sort of psychology expert, even though she only took entry-level classes at community college in the 1990s and read maybe 3 additional books. Only books I remember her reading at all our entire lives. She missed every one of our actual diagnoses, still refuses to accept I'm autistic, and has terrible mental health herself. She even says she studied psychology with the straight-on-your-face girl. No. You got your GED in your 30s and took a few extra classes for fun. It's interesting how parents sometimes adopt psychological tools and terminology without having the full training to back it up. While the intention to resolve conflict is usually good, forcing those I feel statements can often feel more like a mandatory performance than a real way to fix sibling arguments. Story 125. My parents raised us bilingually, and as they were our only source of English, decided to not waste time on baby words and teach us only proper English. So we were the weird little kids who, when interacting with the English-speaking cousins, would say, "I need to urinate," talk about domesticated members of the canine family, or casually mention the anachronisms we observed in movies. Also, what slang we had was a generation out of date.